Hello and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about classical education, the ancient world, and stuff. My name is Thomas Magby. Isn't that good?
Catch all.
Stuff. Extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My name is Thomas Magby. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. A.J. Hannenberg.
That is me.
And Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hi.
Now, gentlemen, first I want to say thank you to AJ for posting last week's episode and for correctly, that is 100% definitely the name of my child. So thank you for sharing that with the entire world.
So if you want to knit like a little booties or a shirt and put the name embroidered
well, I can imagine
the
it would take so much to knit that. I can't imagine being able to fit that.
It's a very long name.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy your paternity leave?
1 week paternity leave?
Well, that's
from
what
the
it
podcast.
is. That's what it is in the States, right? So
yeah, 1 week. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I mean, you don't have to thank us.
Yeah.
I do want you to feel like you kind of need to make it up in some little extra hours here.
Oh, so I got to do a couple extra episodes to make up for it.
But it's
like
just.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's protected by law is the position itself. So thank you for an unpaid week off from the podcast. Much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're paid. You're getting just as much pay.
You're
actually
as you're usually
cut
getting.
anything.
So
you'll be receiving your usual paycheck.
That is 100% true. So today we are going to be talking about Brave New World again. And, you know, I just isn't it wonderful that this podcast has such people in it? Let's start at once.
I was going
to say, isn't it a sort of a brave new world for you, Thomas?
Being a father? Oh, wow,
fatherhood?
yes. But
Isn't
hopefully not the same kind of Brave New World. That would go poorly.
The one of inescapable social destiny?
Yes, I guess. Though we've already planned out our child's future life to the T, of course.
Be a doctor?
Doctor/lawyer/teacher, and will obviously be classically educated, so has to get a PhD in classics too. I don't know.
A doctor, a lawyer, a gog.
I don't know. Fluent in Latin as well, so I don't know. Here we go.
So we are, on our first, when we talked about Brave New World before, painted the picture of the world that Huxley had created. A little bit of background on Huxley, some of which listeners pointed out was incorrect, which is always great. I don't mean that sarcastically. Sounded sarcastically.
I love getting those emails.
But
like,
yeah,
it's really helpful.
Things like Huxley's grandfather wasn't actually on the ship with Darwin, but was a huge Darwin champion. So that, I mean, I had made that mistake my whole life. So that's good.
Well, he may have been a stowaway.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah, seriously. You don't know.
Come at me.
Yeah, seriously.
Can't prove a negative, boys.
Yeah.
Aldous Huxley's grandfather was on, what was the name of the boat?
Obviously, it's
Darwin's. It's like
the Beagle.
The walking fish.
The Beagle
was on the Beagle.
Yeah.
Convince me otherwise. Sit in the middle of campus.
It's like all those videos that are telling you that Australia doesn't exist.
Yeah. Anyway,
that's an internet thing.
That's a thing.
Australia doesn't exist.
Yeah, Australia's not
where
real.
did I go?
I've never seen it.
Oh.
It was a lot of the students like to make fun of them. Anyway, it's a whole line of videos. I don't recommend any of them. Please pretend I'd never.
Well, it's like,
anything.
have you ever seen a baby seagull or a baby pigeon? Anyway, whatever.
What?
You're right. Oh my god.
Okay.
So we just did a little bit of world building, and in the podcast I said we're not really going to get to the story. But for this one, we are going to talk a little bit about the story and these characters that are in the world. And then draw out what I think are some of the big and interesting themes, or some of the ways that I go about teaching this book. So, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I would suggest stopping this right now and go. And if you want to listen about Brave New World, go and listen to the first podcast on the Brave New World, and then come back and do this one, because I'm going to assume that the listeners have a working knowledge of the world that we talked about.
And isn't there another podcast that did an episode? We are notified about another rival podcast.
Yes.
Just to be clear, are they their rival only because they are also a podcast?
Oh, definitely.
Yes.
So all
zero-sum game, winner take all.
Okay.
I've started podcast world.
I don't think that's how that works.
I've started carrying weapons,
okay,
just in case I meate him in the fields and I can start snapping.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yes, and so there apparently in the literary podcast landscape, Huxley is having a renaissance, and we are inadvertently a part of it.
But have any of us listened to this?
I haven't. We were notified of, and then Hannenberg and I were at the SC Society of Classical Learning conference this week, and you were in
I was
Domestic Bliss.
Yeah, yes, I was. I was caring for a child.
Shout out to SCL. Please accept our application. This is the second year that we have been rejected for SCL. Let's keep it going. Keep on rejecting us.
We'll keep
trying. It'll be tradition. Every year we'll apply, and you'll reject. It'll be great.
It'll be fun. Okay.
I assume we want to name. So if anyone wants to listen to that episode, that's History in Reverse is the name of the podcast.
And sorry, we have nothing to say about it because we will listen to it, but we haven't. Anyway, if you are History in Reverse listening, keep on working backwards. I don't know.
Or watch your back.
Yeah. Just from Hindenburg. It should be clear. I'm a pacifist, peace-loving Canadian. Anyway, unless we're on the ice. So,
aren't you always on the ice in Canada?
We are.
Sorry.
So the story starts with painting the picture of this world. There is this a gentleman, and he is taking a school group of alphas, little alpha kids, or alpha younglings, off to the Department of Hatcheries, and he's showing them how all these various children are bottled and born. And they're having to write down notes because they're going to have tests when they get home. And this serves sort of good world building and exposition for the reader to know sort of what's going on. But then when the story gets into swing, we're sort of introduced to three characters. And these three characters all kind of have a weird sort of feeling that the things just aren't really perfect. So let's start with the character of Bernard. And these are all, Bernard Marx is an alpha. And he has some sort of pencil-pushing, white-collar job as an alpha. I can't remember quite what it is. It's not...
Is it the advertising guy?
Or that's Helmholtz. He has some sort of administrative job.
Bernard's an alpha? Wasn't he like an alpha minus?
No, he's an alpha, and he should be like a pure alpha, not an alpha plus. But there's something about him that either during his time in the hatchery or whatnot... There was something, he is a couple of inches, I think he's like an inch or two shorter than everybody else. Now, all of the alphas are bred to be the same height. Betas are a little bit shorter. Gammas, deltas, epsilons are shorter and going down. So you have this visual hierarchy into the system. Whatever happened to Bernard, people whisper and say, I think a little bit of alcohol spilled into his blood serum when he was going along the conveyor belt or whatnot. So somebody was, having a little GT on the job and spilled it into the embryo.
But he still gets to be alpha plus, even though he's slightly shorter.
Yes.
Okay.
So this world isn't so clinical that every imperfection is completely done away with, but he sort of has lived with a little bit of a social stigma. Everyone is like, Bernard, he's sort of a little bit of the outsider, and he's felt it. He's got a little bit of a Napoleon complex.
They rest their elbows on his head all the time.
Yeah, but
he's short.
Now I need to highlight that the height difference is not in feet. It's pretty minimal. It's like in inches. If it may even just be like 1 or 2 inches. It's not big, but it's enough that with everybody being at uniform height, he sort of feels inferior. And so that's given him a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he's kind of grown up and sort of developed into someone that has a little bit of an outsider mentality. And one of the things he absolutely hates or does not like taking is he doesn't like to take Soma. He doesn't like to take it and feel kind of inauthentic and fake. There's many times that he sort of makes references to the fact that by taking Soma, he's lacking authenticity. Now, this kind of makes sense with him being, short and grumpy about it. That he craves some sort of real authenticity and real connection with people, because he's always sort of feeling like everybody's like, oh, hey, shorty, every time that they hang out. So he's got this little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and he doesn't just want to deal with it by taking Soma. So that's Bernard. He is not he's very sympathetic at the beginning of the book, but he turns into a bit of a twit as the book goes on. And the seeds of his twitness, his twitterdom. Oh wait, that's a different, his twittery.
Yes.
Is evident in sort of these early chapters. Okay, so there's Bernard. Then there is Lenina. Lenina, named after Lenin. All these characters are named after basically centralized planners and communists and socialists. We have Marx, we have Lenin, we've got there's a Mussolini in there somewhere, I think.
So
sounds like a pasta.
Yeah.
Is Huxley doing this as a criticism of those people?
I think he's just saying that
or this is just
as they look back in history and they think about who are the names that we want to emulate? It's these people that thought about strong central organization, like how we look back and say, I'm going to name my kid Joshua, or I'm going to name my kid Ezekiel, or whatever.
I just wonder about it because Ford is their God, is that the right? Whatever. So Ford, a capital.
There's Henry's, yeah.
So I'm just saying, so if capitalists are very highly praised, but then also these centralized planners are highly praised.
But it's not just that he's a capitalist; it's that is the inventor of the assembly line, and that's sort of more of it. Okay, so there's Lenina, and she is a beta, but she is one of those betas who has not been sterilized and who can bear children. As Huxley points out, that the women who are sterilized tend to somewhat develop a little more on the masculine side as they develop, and those who, not greatly, like it's not a grotesque thing, but he is saying that those that have not been sterilized generally have more of this sexual attractiveness to them. And Lenina is one of these, and as a beta, she is very highly sought after all of the alpha and beta citizens, and so she has been dating. It's not even dating; it's just essentially going on dates and sleeping around with many men over the course of her life, and she, at the beginning of the book, confesses to her friend, the delightfully named Fanny.
Good.
And I think definitely that Huxley is thinking like Fanny, like your bum, because
thank you.
Again, sort of this sexualization, this sort of playfulness.
Fanny with like a TH?
No, with an F, not Fanny, like Thanos.
Fanny.
That's what I heard.
Oh, Fanny with an F.
Fanny. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so again, you even see this. The sexualization or the sort of the infantilism of the whole thing even baked into some of these characters' names and dispositions and whatnot. Anyway, so Lenina is like, man, she's just not feeling the dating very many people thing, and she has been seeing this guy named Henry for a month exclusively.
How dare she?
I know, and Fanny is like, girl, that's not good. That is unhealthy. This is, and then she's like, "Why are you doing this?" Mm-hmm.
I guess we referenced Brave New World and 1984 being tied or related. So there's no fear of someone coming in and imposing something on her, is there?
No.
Is there any threat to her if she stays in this relationship?
There isn't. There isn't the same kind of threat of a 1984, but there's more just generally like a concerned friend saying, this is not good for your health."
Right, for her to just sleep or to
yeah.
To be committed to one person for longer than like a night, right?
Yes.
Like that's not okay.
Yeah.
So it's less like, the big black boots are going to come and drag you off if you don't conform to social norms, but it's more, this is not healthy for you, and I'm concerned for you as a friend. It's so baked into their development that, yeah.
I mean, hanging out with one person for too long gets into all sorts of emotional trouble, and you're not sharing yourself with everyone else and having the kids you need to have.
Yeah.
And
although there is a system in place of those who can't really fit into the system, there is a place to ship them off to, and we'll get to that at the end of the book. So Lenina has been seeing Henry, and she says essentially that she just can't really quite put her finger on why, but just sort of feels like she wants something a little more special than just running off to bed with the first person that or the next person in line. And she doesn't really know why, and then but she just wants to spend more time with Henry. She's sort of developing, and as outside readers are like, yeah, she's developing feelings, obviously, for him. She's starting to fall for him. And Fanny's like, girl, you gotta get over this. Girl, you gotta, find some other dude. So she's kind of, feeling a little weird, feeling like everything's just not working for her. And then we have the character of Helmholtz, and Helmholtz is an alpha plus. He is the top of the top. He is handsome. He's tall. He's smart. He's accomplished. He has a great career. He has this mixture of what would be considered like an academic position, but the academic position is not something to do with learning. It's something to do with advertising. So, I mean, he's a persuader.
Sure. It's like applied psychology.
Applied psychology,
sure.
Persuasion. He writes jingles. He comes up with sentences that get stuck in your brain. And he's one of the people that writes the things that when you go to sleep at night, that plays in your pillow and you remember it, and then it sort of helps determine or condition your actions. But it's not that he's working in Madison Avenue. It's just they talk about it that he's more in what we would consider more of like the Oxford setting, but it has nothing to do with knowledge. It has everything to do with sort of the advertising. So, and Bernard and Helmholtz are buddies, and Bernard comes to Helmholtz, and they start talking, and Helmholtz says, I'm the best at what I do, but Helmholtz says, man, I'm just kind of sick of like all these girls throwing themselves at me. And Bernard's like, and Bernard, who's a little bit shorter and has not really experienced girls throwing themselves at him, is like, oh, my child, I'm so sad for you.
I got one thing to say, and that's that I can sympathize.
Yeah, they get to it. That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so Bernard's like, and Helmholtz is like, and I love writing. I love coming up with these sayings, he says, that where when I put these sentences together, I just love seeing it hit somebody and go inside somebody like an X-ray, or like they've just sat on a pin, that these words have this effect on people. And he says, but, what's good, but I'm just writing about like crap. Like I'm just writing about advertising things, and nothing's really meaningful. He says, I wish I could write something. Well, here, let me just read to the book what he says. Helmholtz says, do you ever feel, he asked, as though you had something inside you that was only waiting for you to give it a chance to come out? Some sort of extra power that you aren't using. Like all the water that goes down the falls instead of through the turbines. He looked at Bernard questioningly. You mean all the emotions one might be feeling if things were different? Which is a very Bernard answer. Helmholtz shook his head. Not quite. I'm thinking of a queer feeling I sometimes get. A feeling that I've got something important to say, and the power to say it. Only I don't know what it is, and I can't make any use of the power. If there was some different way of writing, or else something else to write about. He was silent. Then, you see, he went on at last, I'm pretty good at inventing phrases. The sort of words that suddenly make you jump. Almost as though you'd sat on a pin. They seem so new and exciting, even though they're about something hypnopatically obvious. But that doesn't seem enough. It's not enough for the phrases to be good. What you make with them ought to be good too. And then he goes on to say, but what on earth's the good of being pierced by an article about these sort of inane, silly things? Besides, can you make words really piercing, like the very hardest X-rays, when you're writing about that sort of thing? Can you say something about nothing? That's what it finally boils down to. So Helmholtz has the capacity or the gift of being able to turn a phrase, or to be able to he knows that he can say something that affects people. He has rhetorical skill, but he has no content. He has no grammar. He has nothing important to talk about. He has all the skills to say something important and nothing important to talk about. All he has is just like, buy this car or whatever.
He will eventually say something, though, isn't that?
He will eventually say something. So this is at the beginning. So these are the characters, and this is their problems.
Is there, so we talked last time about how the lower tiers, lower caste, whatever the appropriate term is, they are hindered in some way. So,
yeah.
Alcohol or whatever. So are the alpha pluses just like a regularly developed human?
Yes, and I think that so they're regularly developed, and the pluses I don't think come in any sort of cognitive ability, but come in like physical appearance and they don't really address how different the alpha pluses are from the alphas, but there does seem to be a little bit of a height and a little bit of a like. Even if you want to think of British society like an aristocracy kind of thing.
Yep. Are they also sort of selected as the genetically superior specimens?
I think so.
Aren't they all like attractive and fast and muscular and tall and
So like us. Yeah.
Obviously.
Exactly, yeah, right.
This is why we will never ever videotape an episode.
Because then we could be proven wrong.
Because the audience would be like, nah.
Yeah, like we're just eating like bags of grease and sitting in waiting pools and I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just trying to think of something that's not
Guys,
very attractive.
next time. That sounds awesome.
Anyway, so these are the three characters, and then So when I teach this, I say, okay, we sort of diagnose these characters, and as we sort of peel across the layers, we say sort of what's really bothering them. And eventually the students get to some sort of answer by saying they want human things that this society doesn't provide anymore. So what are these sort of natural human things that they want that this society has kind of bred out of the system?
Babies.
Okay, so, well...
That's what Lenina wants, right?
An honest relationship.
Yeah, Lenina wants meaningful relationships, somebody to love, somebody to share her experiences and her life with.
Yeah.
And maybe that translates into family as well, but at least, although she wouldn't put it in these words, somebody who cares for her and nobody else. Somebody who loves her and not others.
Care for.
Yes, and someone to care for.
Yeah.
Someone to cherish and to be cherished by, which I think is a very, that is a very human need.
Yep.
Loneliness is one of the, a terrible thing. If you're feeling like there is no one you care for and no one who cares for you. Lenina, wants to be cherished and wants someone to cherish. Okay, what about Bernard? He's a little harder.
Is it capacity for advancement? Has he been naturally stunted, so he can never prove himself, he can never advance, because he is an alpha and maybe a lesser one, he can never make alpha plus, he can never be a regular alpha?
Maybe as part of that, there's also, he wants to be seen as sort of important in the eyes of others, and that becomes very bastardized and terrible later on in the book, because when he comes back and has this sort of trophy, everyone's like, "Ooh, Bernard, you're so smart," and he gets all this praise from not even having done it. He gets what he wants, and it's bad for him. He becomes a jerkbag. So he becomes a jerkbag. He wants recognition and praise in the eyes of others because he's been teased his whole life. But there's got to be a good desire behind that kind of ugly human.
You could call
outflow.
It self-realization or potential.
Yeah, or desire to be part of the community, wanting to be.
It's like honor. He wants respect from.
He wants respect.
Community.
I think respect is.
That's a good way to put it.
And then he falls in the same pitfall that many people fall into, is that he wants respect without being respectable, without having to be respectable.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Helmholtz is probably one of the easier ones to point out. But what does Helmholtz sort of want?
Meaningful work.
Meaningful work, creativity. The man's a poet. The man is an artist. The man wants to do what human beings do, which is to express oneself beautifully.
He wants purpose. Some sort of actual purpose beyond just ads.
And he doesn't feel rewarded when he's the highest paid ad man or the highest paid word worker in the industry.
It's like being the fastest swimmer across the kiddie pool.
Yeah, maybe.
Fastest to the bag of grease at the other end.
Yeah, good. There it is. It's all connected.
Oh,
good.
My goodness. That's the gross.
Full circle.
Gross summer. So he wants, the kind of thing that, like, why do our students, spend all these hours trying to learn how to play guitar? Or what drives all those communities of people to, like, curate Wikipedia? Like, they're not getting paid. But there's this idea of purpose, meaningful work, maybe even legacy, adding value to the world. And he thinks that what he's wasting his light on valueless things. Okay, so there are these three characters, but they're not like upheaving their life for this. This is just a little gnawing dissatisfaction that they have in the back of their minds. Okay.
Do you have any sense that other people feel this, or do we only know that
we only really get these characters' insight? There's plenty of other characters who are like sort of glassy-eyed, like everything is awesome, and then just talk about like how great everything is today.
They're bought in.
Mm-hmm. They're bought in.
Kool-Aid's ingested.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They're ready to go.
Okay. So a couple of things. So then Lenina takes Fanny's advice and decides that she is going to go on a date with somebody else, and to kind of like stick it to these other boys that are all these like handsome boys that are vying for her attention, she decides to go on a date with Bernard. Little awkward, weird Bernard. And Bernard is excited because Lenina is attractive and is, all the boys want her.
Desired by it, yeah.
And Bernard gets a little bit of reflected respect from he thinks it's respect. He gets a little bit of that feeling of, people want what I've got now. But it's Lenina, and that's a terrible thing. Nobody, whenever you see, like, I don't know, when someone drives a fancy car, everyone driving the fancy car says, everybody wishes they were me. But everybody seeing the car is like, man, I want that car. And doesn't even think about the person driving the car. Anyway, Not to compare Lenina to a car. Well, I am, because that's how this world is set up, which is a terrible thing. Is that women are these objects to be won and to be conquered, and that is. And I always joke, I'm like, does that ring true today, kids? And they're like, oh, are you kidding me? Of course it does. And by seeing it in this extreme way, they are sort of maybe even for the first time awakened to kind of how dehumanizing and terrible that is. Okay. So Bernard and Lenina, they're going to go on this date, and so they go on their date, and it's really hilarious. They get in their helicopter, and they go to Amsterdam, and they watch a lady wrestling competition. I don't know why Huxley thought that was what we would do in the future, but there we go. Maybe because it's kind of like, I don't know, inappropriate. I don't know. We have lady wrestling now.
I was going to say, was WWE big in Huxley's time?
Yeah, I guess. I think it was something that he thought would be scandalous, a scandalous thing to watch, and we're like, we have that. Anyway.
We get pretty big numbers.
Yeah. And then Bernard is taking Lenina home, and he stops the helicopter over the English Channel, and he hovers it there, and he turns off the radio, and there's a storm sort of coming on the horizon, and he just sort of hovers there in the silence, and he's like, let's just sit here and hover in silence. And just, Bernard is doing what you should never do on a date, which is try to like manufacture a moment when and he's trying to like really connect with Lenina, and Lenina is freaked out. It's weird. Bernard's like, let's just listen to the silence. I don't want to talk. I just want to exist in this moment without everybody around us. Nobody's watching us. It's just us. Lenina, who has been bred like everybody else to distrust and hate silence, is very uncomfortable without any distraction. And she immediately turns on the radio. She just needs to have something distracting her. And she doesn't want to have this moment with Bernard. And she doesn't want to have some sort of conversation. And she's sort of saying, like, aren't we going to hurry home and, like, go sleep together? Because that's what happens at the end of dates. And he kind of gets upset. He's like, really? Like, we're just gonna do that? Like everybody else? We're just going to... And he has this speech where he says, we're just going to, like, jump into bed together like kids, which...
That's weird.
Which is a weird saying, but what he's getting at is we're just going to indulge ourselves. We're like we've sort of been trained to do.
And in their world, children are encouraged to engage in that sort of
yes, exactly.
play.
Children,
that's messed up. But when he says like kids, in their world, that's actually a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But he's also feeling like he's got this intuition that there's an immaturity to it, or that he sort of has these glimpses that delayed gratification is maybe a good thing,
or that there's maybe something more to a relationship than just jumping in the sack together.
And then Lenina's like, I don't really know. Is this happening or not? And he's like, fine. And he takes Soma, and off they go. And it's, okay. And then they're going to go on another.
So does Lenina actually want that family connection that you just talked about? Like, didn't she just reject it?
She is. There's sort of hints that she's doing this also to see if Henry gets jealous, kind of thing.
Okay. So she's not actually interested in...
Yeah. She's not really interested in Bernard. And she's kind of like, her friend got her head all twisted around saying that she was unhealthy and hanging out with Henry so often. Should we talk about... I feel like we probably should talk about Orgy Porgy, because it plays such a big role at the end of the book.
We kind of have to.
Okay, so...
should we give a...
Yeah, we should probably give a little bit of a disclaimer. I mean, if
you're listening to Brave New World,
if you've been like, my child is fine so far, then, I mean, keep going, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But you might want to, if you've got kids or sensitive ears in the car, this next little bit is a little
pretty sensitive. So some people have talked about this book as that there's no need for religion. And I don't think that's necessarily true. There's a character at the end of the book that says there's no need for heaven or God or sin or the idea of like needing to reward ourselves by virtuous living for the reward of heaven. But there is still, as far as Huxley seems to be concerned, a need for communal liturgical practices as sort of religious expression. And he has this in the world as basically the world's worst Bible study.
Right. Yeah.
It's called the Solidarity Service, and 6 men and 6 women are put together. We don't really know how, but they go to essentially a church building, or they go to some sort of community church center. and they go through a liturgical service. They go through a service, and Huxley is obviously thinking of the Church of England and Catholicism as he sort of structures the service. It has elements of that. I'll describe the service, and then I'll talk a little bit about why I think Huxley has this in the story and in their lives. Like, they're conditioned at birth. Why do you need to have a religious service? What sort of service does it serve? Purpose does it serve? So 6 men and 6 women, the 12 apostles, come together, and they chant and they sing songs basically about how together we meld into one another, and our individuality is put together into a unified one. And they use like industrial metaphors about metals being melded together to make steel, and water, drops of water slipping into one ocean, and us we drink to our annihilation. It's this idea of the individuality is stripped away, and we're all one, you guys. We're all like the universe is love. We're all.
That sounds familiar too.
Isn't this kind of a way of preventing maybe conflicting worldviews? If someone has a different view out there, this sort of draws them all back together. It gives them something to believe in.
Yeah, and it also blunts the edge of individualism.
Right.
So what they do is then they what they don't really realize is that liquefied soma, or aerosol soma is being pumped into the room, so they're getting sort of high on the soma. They pass around the Eucharist, but instead of it being bread and wine, it is a strawberry milkshake and cake or something, or soma wafers. And very indulgent in what they eat, and they drink this cake and drink this strawberry soda laced with soma, and then everybody is sort of all hopped up and all feeling great, and then someone yells out, it's sort of this fever pitch of emotion. The music is getting more intense. The chanting gets more intense. It's almost sort of tribalistic, and then there's this great emotional release. And this great sort of physical release, and it gets to this euphoric pitch, and they yell orgy porgy, and then it is insinuated that they all sleep together. That there is a sort of the 6 men and the 6 women have, well, you know what the word means, and then it's done, and then the passions have been quelled, and the high emotions have been exercised, and everyone's sort of like, okay, whew, man, that's like. Feel like we just had some real good community. We were just doing life together, and everybody goes
doing life together.
Yes, and
my word.
I know. I'm trying to be. I'm intentionally using the sort of language that we use in church to sort of show why I think Huxley's doing this. And so they have this grotesque and terrible ritual, and then off they go back to their regular lives, and it sort of marks their week. Okay, so it's like it is functioning as a church service for them, and Huxley is definitely a member of the school that looked at the anthropology of religion and went sort of as himself not a if he believed in God, I don't even think he did, but saw religious expression as sort of this weird anthropological thing and studied it. And he probably takes a similar kind of view as many psychologists of his day, that religious expression is just sort of this natural human expression that helps give people order and meaning to their lives, regardless of whether or not it's true.
So you can swap out. You don't need the God part of it. You
don't need Jesus. You don't need God. You just sort of need to have
a regular meeting.
You just need to have a regular meeting of people who are holding up values that are good for the community. The values being solidarity and not unselfishness and working together. And if they believe it, fine. If they don't believe it, but it actually sort of like gets them through the week, that's great. I'm reminded of sort of when Jordan Peterson is asked, do you believe in God? He says, I act as if I do. Because you get all these, he sort of says, because you get sort of these psychic benefits. You get this sort of these benefits that come to help give meaning and order to and organization to your life. And whether or not he exists or not,
it's kind of secondary.
It's kind of secondary. What's primary is the sort of framework to live. And I think Huxley is that's why he's giving them orgy porgy. Here's another thing.
I think Shapiro is in kind of the same boat.
Oh gosh, Shapiro's not in the same boat. He's Jewish.
He is a full devout Jewish, but if you ever ask like what is God, his view on God is less than than the old scriptures would sort of
interesting.
imply.
I haven't.
As far as I know,
really...
his views on who God actually is closer to the edges of than. But he is a devout Jew.
Yeah, I know that that sort of this psychoanalysis of religion and religious expression is having a moment now, precisely because of Peterson. And so I bought the 12 Rules. I bought it this summer. I'm going to read it. I'm going to see what all the hype is about. Anyway, cool.
We should talk about Jordan Peterson at some other point, because I think he has what we would call a Christian worldview, but it does not require belief in Christ. Yeah,
him and there's another. Is he a Serbian? What do you know what I'm talking about?
Archipelago. You're talking about Solzhenitsyn?
No, not talking about Solzhenitsyn. I'm talking about a modern.
Never mind.
He's either Serbian or Polish. I can't remember his name. But he is also someone that says, "I love reading Chesterton and Tolkien and Lewis, and you can only understand paganism if you're a Christian." But he's not. I can't remember his name.
We're going to talk about St. Augustine in a few episodes, and I think St. Augustine ties together these two things in a really interesting way also. So all these episodes are connected.
Sounds like there's another. We'll talk about that in another episode. Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Anyway, so you have Orgy Porgy, and it's, again, another tool of control, and it sort of helps blunt the edges of any kind of feeling of individualism or outsiderness, and that's a threat to the system. Bernard hates Orgy Porgy. Okay. Story moves on.
And that we hear about that from his perspective, right? Yes. Where he's like, he doesn't want to be a part of it, but he has to. He does it because...
Or he feels like he sort of has like...
Doesn't someone encourage him?
Or he's got like a social responsibility to do it. Or if you don't come, there's only 11, and people are going to be like, hey man,
where were you?
I didn't see a church on Sunday. Is everything okay? And it's that kind of thing.
That's funny.
Social reinforcement.
Yeah.
Okay, so Bernard and Lenina are continuing their dating experience, and they decide to take a road trip together, or a helicopter trip. And they go off to, they're going to go off, and they're going to...
primitive...
They're going to go and experience, essentially, a zoo. But it's not a zoo of animals. It's a zoo of people. So they fly off to New Mexico, and in...
That still makes me giggle. Yeah, that it's New Mexico. That he just picked a state.
Yeah.
Do we know where they're located? Where Lenina marks, like, the... civilization is located?
It's in this made up place called New Mexico.
No, you said New Mexico is where they're going for the primitive.
Yeah.
No, where are they coming from?
Oh, they're coming from London.
London, that's where
they're coming.
Okay.
So
he picks the United States
as where. That's what I meant.
Well, how do you guys know?
As a Londoner, he picks the United States.
Well, how do you know that this new?
Wait,
how do you know that this New Mexico is in the United States?
Because we have a New Mexico.
What is happening right now?
There's a New Mexico?
Yeah. You really?
No, I'm speaking.
Oh my gosh!
I was going to say,
what is happening right now?
Are you? Yeah.
No, I've been there.
We have a New Mexico. I just think it's funny. He would pick the People Zoo is the States.
In the United States, exactly.
So then they go, and it's a tribe of people that exist, without outside of this brave new world, outside of this conditioning. It's people that live like a tribe, and it's a very primitive tribe. And it's the ways it's sort of described the way that you would consider primitive tribes to be structured. It's impoverished, or it seems impoverished to outsiders. It's got a hierarchical structure. There are families. Women are revered for their for what they bring in terms of their femininity to the group. The men are revered for what they bring in terms of their masculinity to the group. It's a tribe. Lenina and Bernard are horrified because they've never seen old people before.
Right.
Because everybody doesn't age in this brave new world.
Old people, or a lot of the disease that's there.
A lot of the disease, and just sort of like rotting teeth and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they're grossed out because there are babies like attached to moms, and it's just
they've never seen rotting teeth. Aren't they from London?
Yes, I know, but this is the brave new world.
I'm just getting them back for picking the U.S. as the human zoo. Eat that, Brits.
So they go to this and they witness a religious service in this tribe, and what happens is there's some sort of there is the threat to the tribe as sort of symbolized by these snakes. There is a sacrifice for the tribe as symbolized by one of the young men of the tribe. The young man whips himself and draws blood, and then members of the tribe whip him and draw his blood, and then his blood is dipped in white feathers, and then the white feathers are painted on the snakes, and then the snakes are burned, and then the man is carried off as a hero, and it's unclear as to whether or not he lives or dies. I've read it a bunch of times. I still can't remember if he's actually killed for the tribe or if it's just a pastiche. But anyway, the symbolism is kind of clear. Like, one person coming and their blood is sacrificing themselves for our wholeness of the tribe. similar themes going on in both of these religious services, but with different things. In one, someone is sacrificing willingly their individuality for the tribe, and the other one, someone is being almost stripped of their individuality for the social cohesion of the group. All right. And then as they're there, this handsome young man who does not look like he is of the same sort of ethnic makeup of the tribe members comes forward crying, and everybody in the tribe is sort of like, get out of here, you weirdo. And he comes and he sees Bernard and Lenina, and lo and behold, he can speak English. And Bernard and Lenina, and his name is John. And Bernard and Lenina are like, who the heck are you? And Lenina's like, hot dang, John is attractive. And John tells his very sad story. So John's sad story is that he is from this brave new world that you and Lenina come from. My mother is from there. And lo and behold, there's a story where this mother, her name was Linda, and her lover did the very same thing that Bernard and Lenina did. They went off on vacation. Linda was also someone who could bear children. And while on vacation, she lost her little belt with the pill on it and got pregnant. Didn't know she was pregnant, and then she got lost on one of these trips and was lost in the desert, and her date was like, I guess she's dead, and went home to London. Right. And she, pregnant, was lost in the desert and was taken in by this tribe. She gives birth to John, and the tribe is like, he's not one of us. And Linda proceeds to live the way Linda does. So Linda tries to sleep with everybody in the tribe. Linda really wants Soma. There is no Soma, but the next best alternative is this alcoholic beverage that she indulges in. She hates being part of this tribe because she's now a mother, which is, terrible thing. A shocking thing, a disgusting thing. She has done the worst thing that can be done, is to give birth to a human.
And if I remember right, doesn't she sort of long for the distractions of the city? Like she wants magazines.
Yeah.
Sort of
she
thing?
misses magazines. She misses civilization. You guys. She misses sports and magazines.
Like, if I could
and
just
Soma.
have Us magazine.
Yeah, I'd be happy. Yeah. But no, she has this kid who is weirdly affectionate to her, and she has this inner turmoil where she loves him, but is disgusted by him because he is everything. He has turned her into this thing that is disgusting, the mother. And then she tries to sleep with everybody, and everybody in the tribe, is like, whoa. So all the boys make fun of John, like, your mom is not cool, right. Or cool, depending. But of course, John is an outsider. Right. And John wants
all the women in the tribe, how do they feel about her?
Oh, they hate her.
Yeah.
They throw rocks at John whenever he's around. He wants to be part of the group. So he tells this sad story of his growing up. He wants to marry...
You're embarrassing me, Mom! Because she keeps on trying to sleep with the guys.
Exactly. Yeah. John wants to marry somebody in the tribe one day, can't get married. She marries somebody else, and he feels this great loss. And his mom's like, marriage is so, savage. Yeah. And John feels this loss. John wants to be initiated into manhood like all the other men and go into the cave and do whatever their sacred ritual is to emerge as men, but they won't let him. So he is unmanned. He is not initiated into the tribe. And there is no sort of work. There's no one who sort of is taking him under his wing and training him. John is not completely ignorant of the world. As a young boy, he found in a garbage heap 2 books. One, a book that was like an instruction manual for like a toaster or something, and he learned some basic mechanical things by reading this manual. The other book that he found was the complete works of Shakespeare, and he read the complete works of Shakespeare, and this ended up being for him his moral and human and worldview shaping framework. So when his...
So did he try to kill his uncle?
Well, when his mom was sleeping with this guy named Pope, John hated Pope because he felt like he was disrespecting and besmirching and his mother, and that they were living in sin. And so when he read Hamlet about King Claudius sleeping with Gertrude, and he was like, ooh, wasting away in their enseamed bed, gross. John's like, oh, I know what that feels like. I know what Hamlet's feeling right now. And all these feelings of wanting to be involved, he feels like Othello, an outsider. Othello's probably the most noble, honorable Shakespeare hero. And he is immediately suspected of crimes because he's African. And so John sort of feels the same thing because he is not of the tribe. He sort of sympathizes with Othello. He meets, and then so when John sees Lenina, he is sort of inflamed with a new love for her. He lost this first girl to a tribe, but he sees her and he's like, oh man, she is cute. And so then all of a sudden,
one might even say pneumatic.
Yes. And so then Romeo and Juliet floods into his mind, and that she burns like a torch. She teaches the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Like these things pop into his mind.
And he won't take the lesson of Romeo and Juliet and be like, ooh, a bad idea.
Bad idea. Yeah. So John says, listen, I have no anchor here. I have no feeling here. Linda's like, can we take me home? I got to get out of here. And John says, well, yes, I want to come and I want to meet my father and go and find my place, this place. My mom keeps telling me that I would be happy if I was home, and I want to go home. And they're like, fine, cool. And Bernard's like, everyone's going to love this guy. So they take John home, and it immediately turns into like a Pocahontas story, or like what's the other... In the 19th century in colonialism, they would, bring these oddities home to England and show the king and queen, like, look, this is a princess of India. And they'd be like, oh, wow, she's so weird. And, these terrible stories. Yeah. And there's a similar thing going on where John is paraded around, the upper crust. And they ask him questions like, do you, savage, have a father? And he's like, yes. And they're like, oh, how gross. Oh, savages, aren't they fascinating, right? And Bernard...
Even though that father is like one of them.
Yes, we'll get to that. Yeah. No, and then Bernard is welcomed into all these like high society parties because he's the guy that brought the savage that is like the specimen of the hour.
He's the gatekeeper.
He's the gatekeeper, yes. He's the gatekeeper to...
I get the feeling if they could have just John, they would have just John.
Mm-hmm. And Bernard knows it, which makes him even meaner. But anyway. And then John gets to meet his father, and his father is one of the directors of the hatcheries. And when John sees him, his father is giving a tour, and Linda comes waddling in. She's like, do you remember me? But she's all like nasty looking.
Yeah.
And John comes in, and he's like, Father, how I've missed you. And then the dad runs out. Horrified and
not interested. Yeah.
Everyone sort of insinuates he's going to lose his job, or he's just going to be seen as like, whoa, that guy's got a weird past. Is he right to be giving tours to children if he is this kind of miscreant? So, and then John is devastated. Lenina feels her affections growing for John, and also John refuses to sleep with her. They go on a couple of dates, and at the end, he's like, good night. And goes upstairs, and Linda's like, what
are you doing?
Because it cheapens it, right? For him, he idolizes her, and if she just hops right into bed with him,
that's right.
It'll cheat, because that's what his mom was doing, and he doesn't see that as...
He sees that as like
he's
base
not virtuous,
and gross.
It's really base, and so she would be reduced in his eyes, and he would want to do that.
And the honorable virginal woman, I mean, he's thinking of what's her name in... which is the one where like they love each other, but they always hate it, but they always are mean to each other. Is it Taming of the Shrew? No, not Taming. Is it Much Ado About Nothing?
You mean Fifth Grade?
There it is. Good. I think he's thinking of like, the honorable women, the virtuous virginal women who, don't hold themselves cheaply. And he thinks Lenina is like that. So John is being toured around, and as he sees the way that this civilized society works, he is horrified. Yeah. He hates it. When he is taken on a tour of the Department of Hatcheries, and this is how children are born, he is sick violently behind a dumpster. It is horrifying to him. It all comes to a head when Lenina can no longer control herself, and she basically on a date strips off all of her clothes, and she's like, John, this is happening. And John, in not having been realizing that the world is not what he thought it was, and is in a bad place emotionally, freaks out at Lenina and calls her very, very mean names regarding her chastity, and is almost violent with her. And Lenina is terrified and locks herself in a bathroom. And John's idea of that this woman was supposed to be this virtuous beauty, this virginal, virtuous beauty, is in fact, in his eyes, a harlot.
And very much like his mother.
And very much like his mother, he is enraged and he is horrified. And the situation is only diffused when he gets a call from the hospital saying that Linda is dying. And so he goes off to the hospital, and he's by his mother, which is like, he comes and he's like, where is she? She's dying. And everyone's like, why do you care? And he's like, it's my mom. And everyone's like, whoa, gross.
Yeah.
And he goes and he's by her, and Linda's always been uncomfortable with displays of affection of son to mother because it reminds her of this sort of the gross relationship of what she thinks is a terrible relationship, but she's also happy that he's there. Meanwhile, she is on so much Soma that she doesn't even think straight.
Right.
And so John is there next to his dying mother, and she is on Soma, and she and he says, Mom, do you know that it's me? Do you realize? And she's like, John? And he's like, yes. And she's like, go away. Mm-hmm. And then she starts calling out Pope's name in sort of orgasmic ecstasy. And the Soma drug is giving her this sort of ecstatic, almost like sexual experience subconsciously in her mind, and she thinks that she is with Pope. And as she's dying, her last words are "everybody belongs to everybody," and then dies. And this is John next to her being basically told by his mom to go away because she's with her, with her lover in her mind, and he freaks out, or he is so sad. And then it turns out that there's another tour group of a bunch of little kids going through the hospital, and the kid's like, oh, she's ugly, is she dead? And then John loses his mind and smacks the kid, and he starts crying, and then there's this whole big hullabaloo where basically John kind of goes nuts, and he starts thrashing and destroying everything, and then he sees someone coming with Soma tablets to give to the workers because it's their payment, and he like throws the Soma tablets out the window, and he's like, workers, unite, throw off your chains. Right. You don't need to live in this system of hierarchy and abuse. And they're like,
give me my Soma.
Dude, that's my Soma you throw out the window. And he gets into such a big tizzy that the police have to come, and he's subdued with a Soma gas, and the savage has lost his mind. And everyone's just like, man, we should not have brought like a dangerous animal into our civilization. All right. Meanwhile, John and Helmholtz have been talking. Remember Helmholtz, the poet? And John showed him Shakespeare, and Helmholtz is like, man, this is good stuff, except about all that mother-father and like people falling in love and wanting to be together crap. Yeah. No, this isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something real, not this sad trash.
Good.
And John's like, well, crap, this is the best thing I've ever, this is Shakespeare. And Helmholtz is like, no.
Well, if that's the only thing, it's Shakespeare or toaster. And so,
yeah,
good.
I don't know that he has a lot to compare it to.
But the tragedy is that the conditioning in Helmholtz is so strong that when Shakespeare is given to him, he can't shake his conditioning, and he sees it as sad and he sees it as kind of gross in body because it's talking about moms and dads.
Right. He can't shake
and lovers. He can't shake it. Yeah.
Yep.
Very piercing.
Yep.
Thanks for joining in. I appreciate that. Yeah, helpful.
Okay, so then, that sort of is a non-starter. So Helmholtz is like, no, I'm looking for something else, not Shakespeare. I want real art. So okay,
okay.
And then so Bernard is responsible for this whole thing. John is like, I want out of here. Helmholtz is realizing that he thinks he wants to maybe go off and anyway, so they're called in front of this guy called the World Controller. And he's kind of the top of the hierarchy. And I'm not going to go into the conversation because it is definitely the high point of the book. It is the World Controller gives a speech and a defense of their world that is as, I think, rich and interesting as the Grand Inquisitor narrative in Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov. Yeah. And I say it's similar to that because, like the Grand Inquisitor, you can kind of read this conversation in isolation from the rest of the story and find it interesting. Basically, what the World Controller says is, if God exists, we don't need him because everybody's happy now. We don't need sin or virtue because everybody has all of the things that they would ever want. We have got rid of the things that made us miserable, like families and passions, like high passions. They made us miserable because they created conflict. We don't need conflict. We've given everybody sort of their bodily desires, and if anybody wants more than that, they're just not going to fit in here, and they should leave. So the World Controller is like, even if God exists, it doesn't matter. We don't need him. We have Christianity without the tears, is what he says. In other words, he says, we have the kingdom of heaven without Christ, salvation, or virtue, or sanctification. But, it's a kingdom of heaven that all these characters are unhappy with. It's not jiving with their human natures or whatnot. Anyway, so Helmholtz takes the package, and he says, I'm going to leave. And he goes off, and he's going to try to seek after this art himself on, I think it's like, he goes to the Falkirks. He goes to like some sort of, it's either the Falkirks or Iceland. He goes to some sort of desolate place to try to seek after this art himself.
Yep.
Bernard is sent to Iceland, to one of these communities. He's sort of committed too many infractions, and he's sort of been on a short leash anyway because he's so short.
Good. Thank you. Well done.
So
disapproving look at Graham.
Sorry.
Short leash.
He's been on a short leash because of how tall he is, and so they don't like him, and they sort of see him suspiciously. So off he goes, kicking and screaming, and it's very sad, and it's very pathetic. And then John's like, "Can I go to these islands? I want out of this world." And they're like, "No, buddy, you're so cool. Everyone thinks you're so fascinating. You got to stick around and entertain us because you're such an oddity." And John's like, "Well, nuts to you guys. I'm out." He goes off and he lives by himself in the woods. And he tries to live this hermetic lifestyle. He grows his own food, he builds his own little house, and he is by himself.
He writes Walden Pond.
Yes. But he is, again, searching for meaning, wants something meaningful. The whole Lenina episode has scarred him, and he needs some sort of spiritual output. Like everything is welling up inside of him, and he has no home, he has no place, he has no people, he has no purpose. And he doesn't know how to express this. He takes to whipping himself. He takes to trying to create some sort of elaborate system of rituals to give his life some sort of meaning, but he can't do it by himself. A filmmaker finds him in the woods and sees him one day whipping himself and sees him in his sort of ritualistic life of this hermit wanting to be left alone, seeking his, it's very much like the desert hermits of early Christianity, these going off to the desert to try to work out one's soul's perfecting by oneself. It's very much what it evokes. And so this filmmaker's like, man, this guy's fascinating. Comes back with a camera, does like a nature documentary of this weird savage whipping himself and sort of living this aesthetic life in the woods. It becomes a sensation in the towns. Everybody watches this movie and thinks it's so weird. And then this huge crowd comes to John to try to sort of look at him, gawk at him. Summer holiday, let's go watch the crazy woodman. And John is like, get out of here, leave me alone. I hate all of you. You are all doing you live monstrous ways. The way you live is disgusting. And he's like whipping people and foaming at the mouth, and he's furious with them. And Lenina shows up, and she runs to him, and the crowd is so loud that everyone sort of is getting into an emotional fever pitch. And John is pacing back and forth, enraged, swinging his whip around, telling everybody to get away. People are just enthralled and think this is amazing and interesting. Lenina comes forward on her knees, saying something to John that no one can hear. She's crying, and John is full of rage. It is a high emotional state. And then somebody in the crowd yells out, "Orgy porgy." They start singing the songs of their liturgy. And then in this giant group of people, they have orgy porgy. The book ends with John waking up, looking at this crowd of people all satiated and docile and laying on the ground after whatever horrible acts they have committed with one another. And he gets up and he walks into his house and he hangs himself. And that is the end of the book. It's terrible.
Yes.
It is soul crushing, the story.
But the last few sentences are
famous,
masterfully written.
Yes, they're masterfully written.
We're not going to give it away.
Ruin them.
I don't want to give it away, but man, the end of the book is just some tip-top writing.
But it is clearly a book that is, at the end of it, every time I teach it, every time I read it, even just me discussing on this podcast right now, I just feel so grieved for John, and I just feel so hopeless for the world that is created. And Huxley sort of has his fingers on the pulse of the zeitgeist that we live in and that he saw sort of coming in the 1930s. That when you read this book, that there's just a sort of this absolute feeling of tremendous sadness. At least that's how I feel every time I read it.
And doesn't that mark a good dystopia? Every dystopia should end in a warning like that.
For sure.
If it ends happy or kind of like...
That's not a dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I think that Hunger Games is sort of a failed dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
It ends sadly, but not like it needs to.
Or if he went to the island and was like, hey, this island's all right.
And he lived, and it's like everybody kind of got what they wanted.
Yeah.
Then it's not a good dystopia.
Mm-hmm.
It's a decent dystopia should be a warning against some future societal state that we should be afraid of.
Yes, and for me, when I read this and think about this, the future societal state is aspects of human nature that are catered to, but are very deficient in other things. You sort of have... everyone has anemic souls. Everybody is hungry for real purpose and doesn't have it. Yeah. There is a crisis of purpose. People are talking about sort of nowadays, especially with the youth. With the youth, how old do I sound? No, but there's the youth. This comes up in talking about opium deaths and the sort of loss of purpose, the increased suicide rate, and these kinds of things. Yeah. And there are many wonderful podcasts and just sort of people are talking about this now. And are linking these things together. And this book is part of that conversation, or at least I think is a helpful part to have in that conversation.
I mean, a crisis of meaning is the only possible outcome if everything is relative.
Exactly.
If everything is relative and nothing has meaning, then you're going to have a crisis of meaning.
And if the polis is geared towards catering to sort of cheap and easy satiation of desires, right. Food, sex, entertainment, that kind of thing. So we didn't really get to the question which I wanted to talk about, which is, and a question that someone emailed us asking us to talk about is, does man have a right to be miserable, or should the society work to eradicate what they think are what generally makes people happy is what society should be for, what generally makes people miserable is what should be stamped out at all costs, or should people have a right to be miserable? We don't have time to have that conversation.
I replied that I thought the right to be miserable is what people are exercising when they listen to this podcast.
Okay.
So
shocks. But anyway, that is Brave New World. That's sort of the primer to the story. Go read it for yourself. It is a book that I think I think non-Christians or people who are not in the classical Christian world are in this sort of classical conversation, when they read, they maybe have a different reading of it, or have a different sort of interpretation of it. Or I feel like it's so captures the current zeitgeist, and it is so on the nose, or sort of observational with it, that you can't read the book and then go back and look at your world the way that we live in now and not be a little scared. It's kind of like watching an episode of Black Mirror, right?
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
You can't help but look and say, you can't help but grow a little bit more in conservatism, I think, when you read it, saying we need to conserve things. I don't know what we need to conserve, but there's something that we need to conserve that we may lose if we don't watch it. Maybe that's a provocative statement, but
no,
anyway.
That's a good dystopia should have that result.
Anyway, so that's Brave New World. We're coming up. We're at the hour mark. We could keep talking about this, but
we literally can't, because if it goes too far over an hour, I can't upload.
No one likes us.
Yeah. So I'll wrap it up then. So this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us online at classicalstuff.net. You can email us at classicalstuff@veritasacademy.net. You can find us on Twitter at ClissCalStuff, CLSSCAL stuff. I think that's all we have. So this has been Graham, AJ, and Thomas, and now we're signing off.
Bye.
Bye.